Hello there, my lads, my lovelies, and everyone in between. This is a quick video made very late in the day, far too late in the day to produce a video. I'm sorry I haven't been getting content out. I've been so busy with work. Somebody got hurt at work, and I've had to do so much overtime to help make up for it. It's been a real nightmare for me. However, it's a lot of OT money, but it has completely destroyed any free time I've had this month. So that's why you haven't been getting a lot of content out of JameJame's VR. This will change. The last week of September, I should have a ton of stuff out though, because I have that whole week booked off. Very cool. In the meantime though, I do have a little few bits of tidbits of Pimax news, Pimax Crystal news in particular, that you probably missed because you were at the because you weren't at the precise right place at the precise right time that you have to be to actually get any kind of friggin' news out of Pimax. But I was this time, and I wrote it down for you. So, a couple things about the crystal that we now know. The source for this is Pimax. This came from Pimax's USA office, okay? So this is all legit stuff. The big one is the hardware for the crystal is finalized and in production. All right, it's done. The Pimax crystal hardware is done. The delays, however, are coming from the software and firmware sides of things, which I predicted would be the holdup quite some time ago, as that's always the hardest part. And we really haven't heard a lot of news about that coming from Pimax. And my understanding is that is the pain point they're working on right now. So we do know a little bit though where they're at. So they're in a decent place. The important thing I think is that the hardware is finalized and in production. That's I think the part you should be focusing on. Firmware is something that can even be fixed at a later date, assuming that we get at least a working model out to customers potentially, but I don't really know about this yet. We will find out a whole bunch more very soon though at the 7-year anniversary event that will be towards the end of this month. And coincidentally, when I happen to have booked time off, purely by coincidence. I booked that week off ages and ages ago. It was months ago. I didn't even know about this. But nonetheless, it's going to work out really nicely. But let's get back to the crystal. That's what you guys want to hear about. So one thing is that local dimming and HDR is working. It's in. It's there. So the crystal is definitely getting it. They have identified as being a problem for the moment is the Wi-Fi 6E. WiGig, however, is working nicely. So that should not be a problem. They are working on the Wi-Fi 6E. That is the integrated that it comes with. And I don't know the details of where the problems with that are. So we'll find out. Hopefully soon, or maybe we won't because it'll be fixed by then. I don't know. But I do know that the Wi-Fi 6E is being tricky. We don't actually know anything really about this wireless standard of WiGig they're using. So it could be WiGig 1, 2, could even be wireless HD. We still don't know yet. Mainly what they're doing right now is trying to identify any of the showstoppers that are going to actually upset customers a whole lot. Prevent the unit from working correctly, at least well enough, while we maybe wait for them to get the last few hardware features working correctly. We don't know exactly. They couldn't give us a whole lot of detail on this. But what they're doing right now is testing. And there's these new versions coming out every day to try and get things finalized and working correctly for us. Auto IPD is working. It's in. That's fine. You're going to push a button. Your IPD will be perfect. Sounds awesome. Especially over the current generation Pimax headsets, which are great. Once you get that IPD and the eye relief and all that shit dialed in correctly, they are magnificent headsets. But that is a lot of work, and it can be very hard and challenging for some users. And they'll be gone. Now, this is a little bit interesting because I was curious about this and really couldn't get a straight answer previously. And that is that foveated transport works over wireless. And this is flipping massive, you guys. Lads, lovelies, everyone in between. That is massive. It is massive. Right now, our wireless experience that the vast majority of us are familiar with is that on the Quest 2. Although I know other things like Vive Pro 2 and I guess a handful of Index users can have some wireless too now. But what that's doing is this is transmitting the whole image, basically, compressed a bit or a lot in some cases. And it's the whole image though, right? Where foveated transport is only going to be sending a high resolution image where you're looking. And this isn't, you could compare this to dynamic foveated rendering like we're sort of familiar with, but this is at the transport layer. So instead of trying to improve performance here, what foveated transport does is lower bandwidth, and therefore we can increase image quality. You can see immediately, I think, why this is a big deal for wireless, where we're generally bandwidth limited even on the very fastest Wi-Gig standards that exist. It's still nothing compared to what the wired setup is going to be using, because the wired setup will be using either dual DisplayPort 1.4 or DisplayPort 1.2, and it still needs foveated transport to really kick the whole headset into its maximum potential. So even if you're using the fastest WiGig 2, that's still nowhere near that same level of bandwidth. So this is why foveated transport is so critical for wireless, because that will allow us to attain as much as that image quality as it possibly can be. I was curious to see if foveated transport was going to be something that would work over wireless. That's going to be amazing. The wireless, even when they get 6E working, and in a much more bandwidth restricted scenario, the quality is going to be many steps ahead of what the Quest 2 can do because of that foveated transport. So that is friggin' cool. That is a driver level function if you're not aware of this. So games don't have to support this. It's irrelevant to the game's hardware support. It doesn't matter. This is the driver level. So it just works with everything. So that is super cool. They have reported that the dynamic foveated rendering is being tricky though, so we don't know about that, and if that's a feature we really want working, I think it's fair to say that we're really going to want dynamic foveated rendering on such high resolution headsets. Although this is actually less critical for the Crystal than it is the 12K. And you might be surprised by this, but this is actually a little interesting and makes a lot of sense if you think about it. The Crystal actually performs better than the 8KX. And you might be surprised by that. But the pixel density, well, one, it actually has less field of view, although I don't myself know what the field of view of the Crystal is yet. We don't know. However, it does have less. Now, here's why this is a good thing. The displays on the Crystal are far more conventional than the displays on something like an 8KX or a 12K, because they don't have to be canted as much. They're not so ridiculously wide. There's less tricks that have to be done. The canting of the displays is where we really end up losing a lot of performance. It's just complicated. The Crystal has a much more conventional display configuration in terms of that. Less power devoted to getting a canted display to show correctly to you. This means the Crystal will actually be running better than the 8KX in a lot of circumstances. That is very cool and very good news if you're wondering what kind of hardware am I actually going to need to run this on. This is true of the Crystal, but probably not of the 12K, because the 12K has even wider field of view. So take that into account. We're just talking about the Crystal for now. Some of this does obviously affect the later coming 12K, right? When it comes to performance, the Crystal is actually going to be very competitive. So that's good to hear. Now, a neat thing here is that the Crystal and actually the 12K will have interchangeable lenses. So we've sort of heard this already between the 35 or 42 ppd lenses. But this is actually where you can get diopter lenses, so you don't need glasses or contacts. And that's a really huge deal, I think. I guess also potentially if your lenses get scratched, I suppose you could just replace them. I've never really had this confirmed exactly, or how the lens configuration actually works on these. Of course, I haven't seen one, but it'd be nice to know if you actually scratched your lens, you could just buy new ones. I mean, that'd still suck, but it would suck a lot less than having to buy a new Crystal, right? They're expensive. We're talking expensive stuff here, right? Remember, this is something, what, 1800 USD? Eee, right? It's cheaper than 24, but yeah, it's still a lot of money. But nonetheless, however, right now, this is done by interchanging your lenses with lenses for your prescription. At least that's my understanding of it. However, they are working on adjustable ones. So for now, and maybe at release, we're just going to be looking at, you order, get some lenses for the correct prescription, but later on you might get an adjustable lens. We don't know about that, but that is a little bit of information that they were talking about with us. Anyway, that's the update on the Crystal. I think the big takeaways here really are that the hardware is done and that we're just working on software now. That's no easy feat, okay? So we don't want to necessarily downplay that and make it sound like, well, we're, all the way there. There's still challenges there. And I don't know exactly where they are in terms of a lot of the functionality, what's working, what's not, what's the microphones, what are the audio. We don't really know yet. But what I've told you is what we do. I think if you're interested in the next gen Pimax, you'd be interested to hear this little bits of information I've received. Okay, and that is it. I need to get ready and go to bed. Lads, lovelies, everyone in between, thanks for watching. Love you. I'll see you next time, which will be last week of this month, and have a lot more content stuff there going out. And then Pimax's 7th anniversary event's going to be there. It's going to be a big deal. You'll be seeing a lot more of me soon. Okay, bye-bye.